slaves like Henry Bibb, John Parker, and the slave preacher Anthony Burns, and even Mrs. $20 Bill herself, Harriet Tubman, at least in her early life, were either domestic or skilled labor. Many of them frequently being hired out to people in places outside the plantation was a big part of why they were able to escape successfully in the first place. But my point is, we shouldn't diminish the horrors domestic slaves had to endure based on an assumption. A logical but wrong one. But like I said about Street Talk and the How the Hood was commodified series, A10 has become such a part of at least Ebonic lexicon that there's no point in trying to turn back the hands of time now. And I mean, let's just keep it a book. It does have a certain je ne sais quoi that a bootlicking black man lacks. Go ahead, try it out beside. I promise I'll look away this once. It feels good, right? Now, all that being said, I think it's important that before we try to point out who the H-Ins are, we have to establish what an H-Ins look is. May I present to you the side-eye effect? Like it? I made it myself. This is the official tier list for suspect blacks. Now, understand something. This spectrum is not contingent upon party affiliation, as you'll very soon see. I say that because a lot of people, myself included admittedly, have used HN as shorthand for black conservatives, which I don't believe is fair or accurate. I mean, I still personally don't understand how or why a colored would ever vote Republican after this happened. But that being said, as a registered Democrat until 2015, I can assure you that there are more than enough white wiener wankers on the left side of the aisle to make up for whatever the right maybe lacks. That stuff and Dwayne the Rock My Soul in the bosom of Abraham Johnson have all self-identified as Republican at some point in the past. And you don't see anybody calling them HNs, do you? At least not to their faces. Hell, even Weezy and Hugh publicly threw their hats in with old President Pussy grabbing over here. Colin Powell, despite his warmonger ways, is as respected an ancestor one can be in the African-American community. Allen Key and Condoleezza Rice are two more black Republicans that I personally don't believe fit the HN designation. But again, them being both conservative and colored does make them suspect, because the next tier is a group that I've referenced in the past, a group I call the respectables, aka the bootstrap blacks. This is people like John McWhorter, Tim Scott, and not so long ago, Donald Lemon Brown. See what I mean about the party affiliation thing now? These are the personal responsibility blacks, the black-on-black crime blacks, the rap music is the devil blacks, the we can't address systemic and institutional injustices until we learn to pull up our pants, turn that hat of ours frontwards and start pronouncing our E's and the R's properly blacks. They don't so much deny that systemic injustices exist, so much as they believe such injustices can only be overcome by making blackness as palatable to white sensibilities as possible, before asking white America in as weak and lowly a tone as we possibly can muster to just pretty please not shoot us in the face anymore. Again, both annoying and ineffective, but not HN worthy. Then there are the black people who be contrary and don't think it's very different. No matter the situation, it's almost always black folks who are in the wrong. And when white folks are, there's almost always some excuse why. Fox News calls them green thinkers, but I call them the sunken places. The only person I can think of offhand who fit neatly into this category was Sage Steele, who, because maybe she's still salty because she was the weirdo black cousin growing up and didn't get invited to stay the night because she watched Friends and listened to death metal, seems to always have some sort of pair of shades growing her own. What separates them from the respectable is that their tastes aren't so much based on admittedly law, logic, or even ideology, so much as it is their own personal distaste for blackness. But I still don't think that qualifies as an HN, because these people genuinely believe what they believe, regardless of if they can monetize those beliefs or not. You can even argue that, more often than not, their beliefs are disadvantageous to their family. until after she was already established in mainstream consciousness, or at least that of regular sports spectators. In fact, you could argue that she wouldn't have gotten as far as she did without keeping that Walt Disney Company approved mask on for as long as she did. Sage just straight up hates her own blackness and doesn't care who knows at this point. And frankly, that makes me more sad than annoyed with her. For as much as she says that she's proud to be a biracial woman and speaks candidly about her own experiences with racism in both her lifetime and her career, she just as often, if not more so, goes out of her way to express disdain for blacks who voice their displeasure with those same experiences. And now that I think about it, Stacey Dash should probably go in this tier as well. Are we sure they ain't the same person? But even this doesn't fit the criteria Malcolm gave us. At the end of the day, an HN isn't driven by personal politics, productive its ideologies, or even self-hatred. An HN's primary motivator is self-interest. But then, if the roles of cloud and points is behaved with blood suggested, call me Ben Affleck, bucko, because this chopper-colored fool needs a new candy-painted Cadillac. And there are sadly 3 people who I can think of who fit nicely into this criteria, and possibly a 4th. Dr. Benedict Blackman, Jason Wailord, and Queen HN herself, Candace Kittyburn. The 4th is Larry Elder, but I feel like he might belong in the respectable tier. That being said, he's as extreme as a respectable can get. Matter of fact, I might just do a whole video on him now that I think about it, but anyway, we're moving on. I said I wasn't going to do a whole video for Black people, and I'm sticking to that. But I was going to do one for Whitlock, and I can't tolerate listening to his cum guzzling long enough to make a whole video. But these 2, Candace especially, epitomize what Malcolm was talking about. Like Sage, Whitlock was already an established sports writer before taking on his final form. But unlike Sage, Whitlock decided to lean into his criticism of black athletes, LeBron and Cat in particular, once he realized even they had the angry black man position locked down. The thing with Whitlock is that he goes out of his way to criticize athletes of color for defying the status quo, and even goes so far as to suggest that their wealth disqualifies them from marginalization, something I've talked about already. This is not only stupid, but it's crazy because J. Jonah Jelly Roll knows exactly what and why he's doing what he's doing. He doesn't have the charisma, the pen, or the contacts to stand out in a crowded marketplace, so instead, he resorts to lowball fart sniffing by playing contrarian to virtually every single black sports tape that isn't, yes sir, master, Mr. White Man, sir. This right here is what instead of going that cat for his politics or even in actions, Big Mama's House 3 over here went for Colin's blackness, as if to suggest that him being half white and raised by white parents disqualifies him from even having an opinion on the over-policing of black America. Even though he doesn't seem to have a problem when white people do that, Ben Carson's story is as inspirational as it is. Even without the fabricated stereotype perpetuating qualities Carson gave his younger herself. To take Dr. Carson at his word would be to believe that he was so violent as a child that he nearly assaulted his own mother and stabbed a family member once. But to take Carson at his word would be to call the family, friends, and news sources who say Ben is full of bull feces a bunch of long-nosed Pinocchios. And as the good book says, it's about to 2 or 3 witnesses, there goes your cap check. So the question is, why would Dr. Carson, who the last time I checked doesn't have an upcoming drill mixtape to promote, insist that not only was he 2 steps away from catching bodies, but get mad at the people who called cap on that? Well, according to writer Leon Skather, it's because Carson's whole deal was to paint his story as the perfect redemption arc for evangelical white American sensibilities, from angry poor and blacks to wholesome wealthy and white by proxy. It's the same thing I said about the music, but for the inverse effect. He wants white America to believe that he was everything they believe about black people until white Jesus came along and heard them up and say on both sides. And Candace, I mean, what y'all want me to say about this? Literally, conservative clout chasing, even going so far as to purposefully antagonize Black America at our most harrowing moments. This is as shameless and thirsty a grift as you could imagine a black person doing. And as a result, I have even less respect for her than I do for these two. The worst part about it is she's so thirsty for clout, she doesn't even have the dignity to at least burn her receipts. The woman not only won $37,000 in discrimination case with the help of the NAACP, who she would later call one of the worst groups of black people, but she also ran an anti-Trump blog site called Degree 180 at one point. If you want to know how anti-Trump, well, the headline of this article says, "Is Donald Trump a social experiment?" And this one asks whether Trump has a micro dick or not. Fanface, for her part, wrote articles like, "The Republican Tea Party is run by the Mad Hatter," saying in that article that that faction would, quote, "eventually die off due to their, quote, batshit crazy antics." She then finishes the article by saying that when that finally does happen, we can get right on with the obvious social change that needs to happen immediately. FYI, this was back in 2015, and the site ceased operation the next year. You know what else happened the next year? My point is, Candace Owens is a hoe, a professional poll writer. That's it. That's what she is because that's what she does. Hop from one dick to the next as soon as she sees a new group of goons worth grifting. And that I have no respect for, especially when doing so means antagonizing people for no other purpose. And at the end of the day, folks, that's all it really is. A harlot, in the most basic understanding of that term. Someone so greedy for either fame, fortune, or gold that they'll sell their own self-respect for it. And in the process, knowingly, and in the case of Candace and Batman Scoop here, intentionally betray the interests of their own demographic. Yeah. Look, if you want to suck dick for a living, then by all means do so. That's basically all Twitter is these days anyway. Well, that and expert medical, economic, and geopolitical takes from people who only qualification to give such as a blue check mark. But all I'm saying is, don't make the rest of us watch, or at least hide it behind a paywall, because no one with a functioning brainstem wants to see any of these cheeks getting collapsed. Or maybe you do. To each his own.
Soon to be going for a pinfall. The challenger eating up some damage. And he gets delivered back to the ring.
Oh my God. Oh, fucking hurt.
This is not only a scam, but an illegal pyramid scheme. And this pyramid scheme is spreading like a wildfire, right? If it were to, a person has activity complex or pyramid, perhaps like a CEO of a multi-level marketing company, makes all the money while distributors and so-called business owners at the bottom make little to nothing.
It's not a pyramid scheme. It's not even a scheme per se.
And he tosses it back in now.
Recruitment is the only viable way to truly earn money in a pyramid scheme. But if you can't recruit a ton of people, then you're bound to lose money more than you want to make it. Does this sound like any other form of recruitment you might know? Trying to persuade someone to join your lifestyle, insisting that they tell their friends who tell their friends, and vice versa, making not only loyal followers, but disciples of your lifestyle. And then, when religion blends with a pyramid scheme, some really messed up stuff can happen. The prosperity gospel itself has been described by the Gospel Coalition, of all things, as the worst pyramid scheme out there. And I'm certain many of you know what that is, even if the name isn't quite familiar. The prosperity gospel is the shady, questionable promises that megachurch pastors like Joel Osteen preach. Basically, it's the whole give God all your money and time and trust, and he'll surely bless you tenfold kind of language. Now, even though that's not God's bank account we was going into, if you catch my drift, this is the premise. This prosperity, or health and wealth gospel, depending on what you've heard it called, fits the fulfillment in their lives thanks to whatever it is they're preaching. As T.G. Stevens said,
Yo.
prosperity pastor's success, in other words, are the people at the bottom of the pyramid. Of course it works for him. He's at the top. Secondly, and unsurprisingly, it's a lie told to the desperate. These kinds of churches aren't about teaching God's love, but the wealth God can offer you.
Oh, my.
Everything you do right now, don't you stop tithing. Don't you stop selling offering.
Apparently, in poor countries and in prison systems, prosperity gospel is sometimes the primary, if not the only form of Christianity that's ever preached, because it preys on innocent people. Plus, the MLMs that market for downlines don't stress how many fail. They showcase deceptive success stories and stress that this is the answer to climbing out of poverty. Not only is it a lie, but it's an
Oh, my God. You can't make this shit up.
prosperity gospel leads the idolatry of the super rich. Have you ever wondered why celebrities and wealthy individuals would bother with this kind of preaching? It could be that they adore money so much that they want to believe that by planting small monetary seeds, they can have even more. And no, this isn't to say that all religions or faiths are comparable to MLMs, but the church/cult that we're going to be talking about today definitely has a few glaring similarities. The International Church of Christ answers the question, what happened if I took the religious aspect of recruiting disciples, stuffed it into a pyramid scheme, and then ignored the disturbing behavior that happened as a result?
Sure, he's pumping himself up, but he's also giving his opponent a chance to recover. Quick takedown there. This isn't the smartest thing to do, antagonizing your opponent instead of
Hello
attacking him.
and welcome to Multi-Level Mondays. I'm Gamertag, and today we're going to be talking about Christ's Clothesline, or the International Church of Christ. I've loved the gross model of the prosperity gospel for some time now, but the ICOC somehow takes it a step further. And yeah, Curtin, I know it's ICOC, but in my head every time I'm just saying, God, Maryland, this is just bad news for me. But I digress. Truthfully, there is a trigger warning for today's episode, and this episode is going to discuss molestation and pedophilia. Very serious, very sensitive topics. If you're not in the headspace to hear it, feel free to skip to this episode entirely. Now, it started with Crossroads. Crossroads, if you are not aware, was a traditional Christian movement that introduced shepherding or discipling methods starting in the 1960s and 70s out of Gainesville, Florida. And why is it always Florida? These principles were, and are, fucking weird, just to be honest here. Basically, the elders of the Church of Christ in Gainesville hired this guy, Chuck Lucas, to be a campus minister. He started the Campus Advance Outreach, which basically meant targeting young college kids who were still trying to find their way in life. The biggest principle that came from this, and that really made someone a crossroader, was that you needed to make disciples. Go get more sheep and become a shepherd for Jesus. That was the theory. One of these shepherds was Kip McKean, who was baptized in 1972. And here's where things go south. Apparently, McKean, as well as another crossroad minister named Roger Lamb, was fired in 1977 because of, quote, false and deceitful doctrine and promoting controlling practices. In just 5 years from being baptized, Kip had done enough irredeemable and manipulative actions to get him fired. I tried to figure out exactly what these practices were, and according to Ryan Britt from Revival.org, Kip would expect his closest disciples to identify so thoroughly with him that they might today be mistaken for the first signs of human cloning. A weird statement, but creating a bunch of mini-me's like you're the villain in Austin Powers isn't an actual crime. Nor did it seem to be the only shooting they put on. But if you keep reading, Ryan Britt claims that these practices weren't the only fucked up thing at Crossroads. Instead, he says that Chuck Lucas, the father of the movement, took part in, and I quote here, sexual perversion and homosexual activity with younger men in his ministry. In other words, molesting children, and irrefutable evidence was given to the elders to prove that this had been happening for quite some time. Or, as this article stated, by 1986, the fake hit the chance. I have no idea what that's word this way, but yes, fake hit the chance. People learned of Lucas's actions, and Mr. X, the author of Toxic Christianity, detailed the events. They need to know about it because they served on the ministry staff that assisted in covering up the real reason for his termination. First of all, it's pretty fucked up that the author of this book admits they helped to cover it up. Like, I need to break it to you, but if you assisted in hiding this, then you're part of the problem too. And honestly, again, just I don't need to break it to you. I love calling out people for their actions and exposing them. At this point, though, I'm really just all for exposing. Secondly, though, this is where Kip, the future founder of the ICOC, got his start. He wrote As this article puts it, if Chuck was the pioneer of his faith, Kip was its perfecter. And rather than make these ideals more transparent, honest, and less controlling, he went to the opposite extreme, supposedly using tactics that his high-ranking U.S. Armed Forces father passed on to him. His father's ideals taught him, quote, how it should be structured, how subordinates should be managed, how traitors and weaklings should be dispatched, how individuality should be smothered, and how even friendship and loyalty should be subordinated to the objective of victory. And apparently Casper just had to take this opportunity to go ahead and put himself for a good shake and a good refilling. So, Casper, thank you for doing today's episode. After all, as we've seen in strict Christian and even Christian-based books before, many of these extremists feel they are fighting battles for God, and not in any loosely interpreted sense, but in a very real, literal way. When Kip built his army of followers, that doesn't just mean he had people that were loyal to him. It means he was really treating them like soldiers, including the negative things. By the time 1979 rolled around, most people realized the Crossroads method just wasn't working. Chuck being ousted as a pedophile only cemented this. However, Kip wasn't quite done with Crossroads yet. Instead, he found his political proving ground, Boston, and thus began the Boston movement, where the Boston Church of Christ was founded. He founded a tiny dying church and rebuilt it using Crossroads methods the following decade, about a year after Chuck Lucas was terminated. Whereas Crossroads instilled excessive fear and guilt, Kip would go on to prey on emotions and tell members how bad they are, how they were going to hell. Crossroads assigned people prayer partners, and in Boston, they were called discipleship partners. These partners in either movement would basically act as spies to use their secrets against each other, tattling to leaders to maintain control. Even if Kip himself wasn't a child molester, he was correctly following the footsteps of one. Like, sorry, but you were part of a movement and realized the founder was using it to hurt people and gain a position of power. Wouldn't you do everything to ensure that that doesn't happen again? I feel like this is just common sense. This is a common chain of thought here and logic, but apparently it's just not. Instead, Kip decided to recreate the same harmful, toxic, and downright criminal environment, and it wasn't long before that started to show again.
Evolution looks to walk out as champions.
What the fuck?
After the I'll never get over hearing that, the Boston movement started growing in full force. Milking sheep and listening to your shepherd was Kip's main prerogative, so you can imagine how happy that made this once tiny, dying church. He also formulated what became known as a trademark doctrine, baptism as a disciple. In other words, Kip redefined what it means to be baptized. To him, it wasn't just about fully committing to Christ, but to church leaders too. Anyone who hasn't been baptized in a specific way wasn't actually Christian anymore, at least according to Kip's teachings. A resurgence of baptisms took place, and former members have referred to this period between 1986 to 1988 as the Great Reconstruction. Kip split from the movement his child molesting leaders had started, and in 1993 spread it so far beyond Boston that it earned itself a new name, the International Churches of Christ. They were viewed as one of the fastest growing churches, sending missionaries all over the world. From the outside looking in, this may have just seemed like another giant branch of Christianity that focused heavily on evangelism. But on the inside, things were already falling apart. According to some sources, for every 3 people that joined, 2 left. They didn't really have 70,000 members. In 1994 alone, about 20,000 abandoned the movement altogether. And as more people left, the more their concerning stories began to spread. They said they'd been spiritually abused and robbed of their freedom, time, and money. The ICC, or ICOC, depending on what source you're reading, also has used some pretty common cult-like tactics to draw people in, such as love bombing, showering new members with friendships and the feeling of belonging so that they may be keener on putting up with worse treatment as time wore on. And this was apparently by design. Former leader Scott Deal explained, quote, "Once you get them into the activity, you find out who's a little bit interested. Then you start becoming their best friend.
Clearly,
That's
that
the whole
wasn't how we
idea.
wanted that match
We teach
to go.
people that
Now,
you need to get
we
in there and
focus on
become
what's
that
next.
person's best friend.
How are we going to
Liking them
regroup?
had nothing to do with it.
Here's the
And
thing.
also doing it carefully
What are you
enough
getting
where
to?
they don't alarm their
You
parents.
are.
And if
And
we
that's
ever met
exactly
parents,
why.
we tried to come off as innocuous and as harmless and as typical as a church on the street." Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty damn manipulative
I had the
to
match
me.
won and
And
got a
I
bad
wanted to
break.
find out a few
This
more
isn't
details
a
from those that
punishment.
had been through this.
It's about
And
getting our
thankfully, I
priorities
found an
in line
article from
with our
couple
future
Joe and
goals.
Louise Cranock
I get
titled
that, but
Why
I
We Left
still
the
want
Boston
another
Movement.
chance. Let me prove to you that I can handle going
Christians in
out.
1980,
Again,
they entered ministry
just
full-time.
hear me
And in
out.
1986,
I'll beat
they
the
even
street
sold their
profits.
hair salon to
Okay.
move to Boston with dreams of going on a mission to Italy. Joe and Louise had high hopes. They were told that Boston was on the cutting edge and they'd be freer to express themselves there. But these promises didn't come to fruition. The eldership constantly shoved evangelism down their throats, and everyone was constantly on a guilt trip about being fruitful or not, as they put it. At least one thing did come true, though. In 1989, they were asked to become part of the Los Angeles mission team. No, it wasn't belong to Italy like they dreamed of, but it was exciting all the same. Once they arrived, the couple was, however, faced with some new hardships. They had to find jobs and a home and kept struggling financially, all while having to study their Bibles and be personally discipled and shepherded by the elders. Joe was advised not to go to her second marriage ceremony simply because it was her second time. And Louise was rebuked for not showing up to her weekly Bible talk meeting due to her short throat. And she was further criticized for having her husband tell the leaders that she couldn't make it instead of her saying it herself. Louise stated, quote, I realized that no matter how hard I tried, it was never good enough. After sacrificing jobs, free time with their daughter, and basically their mental health too, they moved back
I gotta
to San
change that. He looks
where
like
they
he has
had been
some
living in the
other
first
type of
place.
stuff right
Though
there.
Joe and Louise were guilted, scolded, and marked by the church, they simply
He like he on some other stuff.
blame them honestly. It's great that they had the ability to leave, to say no more, and move on. But now
Now I don't like when they make it where you have to lose. I could have won that match.
Alright, you guys remember Jesse's incident that happened out, alleged incident that happened out in Chicago, right, with the two African brothers?
You gotta say alleged no more. I think it was
Just don't see how a handicap match against the Raw Tag Team Champions could end ambitious rookie.
He went to jail and he got out, so evidently he wasn't guilty. Allegedly, like you say.
Wait a minute, now I thought that he was found guilty.
I think he didn't do no time. He got out. Well, the two brothers, Bola and Ola, are speaking out about what actually happened.
I thought he was a good actor, but I also was thinking that this guy's a fraud. This guy's really sitting here just lying to these people, lying through his teeth, and not caring. And I think he shed a tear.
And I want a little gay boy who might watch this to see that I fought back.
This dude crazy, man. He shed a tear, man. This dude wild.
Ola is Ola. We don't care. Alright? Y'all can't crucify that man after y'all helped him perpetuate the lie. But their home song was like lovers or something.
They said one of the brothers and Justice Ola allegedly.
Hold on, I thought all of them put this plan together. I thought all of them did this
Allegedly
together.
they did, but I think they were in some type of relationship.
I'm saying allegedly. I thought that was a relationship, but now I don't want to put them in a relationship. That's what she just asked. I'm talking about the fact that all of them did this together. I had to call me a liar and say I'm crazy, but you helped me with the lie and helped me with my crazy.
But she was asking if they were in a relationship. I don't know if that's Ebola, and I don't know how far away. I don't know nothing about this. Somebody played on the phone. Well, this is them describing the incident, how they were supposed to do it.
Then we started tussling, moving around, and then I threw him to the ground. He wanted it to look like he fought back. That was very important for him, because he said, hey, don't just beat my ass, make it look like I'm fighting back and whatnot. So we did that. After I threw him to the ground, I used my knuckles and gave him a noogie. Why did I do that? To give him a scar, to give him a mark, to make it look real, like he really did get his ass beat. After I did that, I fake kicked him. I don't know what he was doing. I wasn't paying attention. That's where I came around with the bleach, the infamous bleach in the hot sauce bottle, poured it on his shirt, Then I finally put the rope around his face. I did not put it around his neck. I just placed it on his face, and that's when we took off.
Bola and Ola have zero room to criticize Justice Smollett. He helped him do all. Whatever you say about Jussie, you have to say about yourself.
You have to stay
If Jussie
strong to
crazy
come
and
out on
y'all
top of the
crazy, if
handicap
Jussie was
match.
lying
And
and
that
y'all
was
was
an
like, knock
efficient
it off.
display of
Now let it go.
maneuver.
Exactly. Why even bring this back up? Like they so innocent. You're so lucky. Because you get like your little middle finger. It's usually to the like that. They get it to his eyes, so that's a little mark. Oh, so he just took it.
This is not going to end well.
Remember when your eyelash fell off earlier? How it looked?
This one could be over.
Go to hell, Now also, Sierra seems like she's getting a little backlash because of the dress she wore at the house. Because it was totally see-through. Did you see it?
Of course I seen it. You seen it too. And you still staring at the picture.
Nah, I'm explaining. So they said she posed for pictures and she was absolutely completely naked. They said she had nothing but gloves, a thong, and nipple covers on. People were like, you have 3 kids and a husband. How could you wear that? You're disrespecting Russell. This is embarrassing to Russell. Y'all just were in prison praying for people. So they were saying all that.
That's what happens to you when you leave prison. Make you get naked.
Locke wants to end this right now.
But, you know, it's always people. I say do what you want. It's always people ain't shaped like Sierra that's the point. I saw Sierra picture. I said, ooh, if her husband around, keep strong. I'm not my business. It's always somebody who eats cheese to live like what's around the clock. And ain't got no business. Ain't got no business. They want to tell us what to do. Mind your business, you lonely crab.
You ain't lying.
I mean, they always just come and lead you. So that, first of all, you can't even walk down Sierra Street without getting arrested. So why are you even coming on what she wears? If Russell was right there with you, so if you allow her to wear it, it's all right by me. I wish I could look like that. I look like that. He's great. Good old time.
I think sometimes criticism comes from a place of jealousy, of course.
Yes, it's always broke people talking about rich people.
He keeps his team in the match.
Yeah, if Russell's fine with that's their relationship. Who are we to okay.
Hopkins' attack gets reversed.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it look cold in that building. I'm just smooth because, you know, COVID out here. When she had back on sneeze and didn't get nobody sick, last year,
This match is really gone for so long.
Like hell.
That is your report. Leave it at too, man.
After the hour, getting ready to do Madison Crowley, they come to the front of the congregation. They like to have a word with her. She don't know how to keep speaking.
Okay, we'll get to that next. It's breakfast for me.
Wake that ass up, girl. The Lord will come breakfast club.
Straight down with a DDT. Here he goes for the win. Here's your winner, Dirty Daddy.
I just can't say enough about the Locks win tonight.
Luckily, the victory speaks for itself, Byron.
You put in the work and good things happen. That's a performance that everybody should hope to emulate.
So you want to ignore your intuition over this nice piece of snatch?
Yeah, you might be right.
Do you hit it wrong? Fuck him. No, he answered me. Fuck him. Fuck you. He said, Nah, I don't care. Fuck out of here.
Hey, bro, you were out in London trying to stop my bitches, bro, and now you coming to me. Why are you so mad at me, bro?
Yeah, I know who you are. I know who you calling. Yeah. Yeah, this nigga is dead to me. So, what exactly is it about black folks and the prospect of making millions, if not billions of dollars that will cause so many of us to line up to sell our souls to the highest bidder? I mean, maybe the fact that white folks have been doing that with our bodies for about 4 centuries or so is something of a precedent, but that's not my point. At what point do we as a people realize that there is no such thing as a benevolent billionaire? Maybe around the same point that we realize that an empty country crop tub is not Tupperware, but I digress. From Rihanna to Ho to Ye, the black billionaire class has become something of a pseudo-inspirational tale, to the point that this class of super elite melanated moguls has become our century's equivalent of W.E.B. Du Bois's talented 10. And if you are one of those 8 and 10 self-identified leftists who has some version of a Marx meme as your profile picture, but can pick the boys out of a lineup of random black bald dudes from the early 20th century, the talented 10th is basically Lenin's vanguard.
Both of you.
For black people.
I need to get my point.
And a lot less pew-pew, stabby-stabby. For those of you who mainly watch this channel for the media analysis and pretty much nothing else, or for those of you who, like me, have just gotten so old and jaded at this point that any and all political theory just sounds like a bunch of old dudes circle jerking their egos off, Du Bois's talented 10th is the term that he used for the 1 in 10 black men who had the capacity to be leaders in our community.
Her business is
people like me and
is that what MVP told you to say?
What are you getting at?
That's it.
It seems like
the boys believed that it was imperative for these men to receive a classical college education,
I think I've said
as
all I want to
opposed
say.
to the more industrial, trade-focused education that people like Booker T. Washington espouse, in order for those men to lead black people out of second-class citizenry. So, in terms of this video, all you got to do is replace a college degree with oodles and oodles of cash, which I mean all of us wish we could do at this point, and yeah, you basically got whatever we call this. Now, I'm not saying that this is at all exclusive to POCs. I mean, the whole reason why Trump got in office in the first place, I mean, aside from the blatant bigotry, is him selling his base on how rich he was. Because for some reason, we still have a tendency to try and to quantify aptitude according to wealth, even though we have a metric butt ton of examples to the contrary. But I don't know, it's just something especially irksome about seeing the Oprahs and the murderous Michaels and especially the Steve Potato Heads of the world using life advice, specifically financial advice, based on some version of black capitalism in order to build their brands, when basically all of the data we have tells us, and their own stories even say, that their lives are exceptional and not exemplary of the way that that system really works. Furthermore, they and the people who treat their word as gospel treat wealth like some sort of virtue, or at least quantifier of it. And Lord knows there are very few grifts easier than telling black people that they can pray their way into prosperity. It's okay, I can use his example. Black Jesus said it's cool. I mean, just from a purely practical standpoint, it's impossible for a single person to control that much wealth and there not be some level of exploitation going on. Whether it's something as subtle as artificially suppressing wages to increase your profit margin, or something as overtly sinister as literal slave labor. So the backbone of the tech industry. The revolution starts with refurbishment. Now, listen, I get it. I think I kind of understand why a lot of us still foam at the mouth over seeing brown and black faces on the Fortune 500 and Forbes most wealthy list. But we shouldn't do that. Like, we really should not do that. For one thing, because there's literally no such thing as a self-made man or woman because of things like, oh, I don't know, public education, public works, public infrastructure, Also, the wealthier you were growing up, the more likely it was that your parents were able to leverage that wealth into you having better quality education opportunities, living standards, and networking opportunities, etc. You are also probably instilled with more frugal spending habits than your average Joe because, believe it or not, the poorer you are, the more likely you are to spend money. Like, if you don't, it's going to get up and run away because, I mean, bills. Duh, nigga. Conversely, the poorer you grew up, the more likely it is that you benefited from social programs like public housing, Section 8, SNAP, WIC, Medicaid, etc. Especially if you grew up in an urban area like, oh, I don't know, Marcy projects. But I'm not really going to waste much time in this video debunking the self-made man/woman myth because a bunch of other videos have already done it, videos that you've likely already watched by this point. But I do want to talk about the problem with the black capitalist mythos and how its inextricableness from the entertainment industry is actually better evidence of my point than any amount of black billionaire butthurt sound bites.
Now it's like, you know, eat the rich, and now we're not stopping.
Okay, so before we get to the whole debunking part, we have to actually understand what black capitalism is. See, it's more than just rich niggas being richer than German chocolate cake, but it's really, in a word, self-reliance. Or I guess that's two words, but whatever. What black capitalists say is that black people shouldn't be satisfied with just being wage workers, which, I mean, you really can't fault that part of the logic, can you? It goes on further to say that black folks should be striving to become business owners, and then they can use that business to hire more blacks, and then those blacks would then buy black, and then by buying black, it would create black communal wealth. Logic sounds pretty sound so far, right? Also, at least since I've been alive, there's been a greater push to see more blacks in the corporate world, even though I'm not exactly certain how having more blacks in corporate America would create more communal black wealth. Maybe those blacks would be more apt to hire other blacks into that field, even though that would probably open up the whole reverse racism problem, which is stupid. But remember, folks, these are the same people that have a problem with affirmative action, even though all of the data we have says that the biggest beneficiaries of AA are actually white women. But hey, what do facts matter when we have pedophiles and talking prunes pushing for re-election? Am I right, guys? Now, to the untrained ear, if this kind of sounds like socialism to you, it's because the logic is kind of the same. An oppressed class seizing the means of production for the purpose of redistributing it to folks who historically have no access to the wealth or the means by which that wealth is created. The problem is when you get to the whole redistribution part. See, nowhere in the Black Capitalist Handbook, which is probably sitting next to Jay-Z's end table right next to Beyonce's diamond-studded thong, does it say that the Black capitalist is obligated to redistribute any of the wealth that they generate back to the community. I mean, let's keep it a buck, folks. How much of that Renaissance tour revenue do you think Beyonce is really giving to the Rebuild Black Wall Street Fund? Probably about as much as the cost of a front row ticket, which is actually a pretty decent contribution when you think about it. My point is, the problem with any form of socially minded capitalism is the whole social part. Regardless of how good your intentions are, at the end of the day, there's still one person controlling the bag. And it's at the discretion of that one person how much, if any, of the bag is going to be redistributed to anyone besides themselves. And a lot of y'all might be sitting there saying, well, it's their money. They shouldn't have to spend it on anything they don't want to anyway. That's fact. Well, first of all, taxes. Second of all, you're actually not wrong, except for the whole fascism part. Please, for the love of God, BreadTube, stop using that word. They don't. Steve Harvey can spend as much of his wealth on mustache wax and alimony as he wants to. Or, I guess, as much as the court mandates in the case of that last one. But my point is, how does Steve being rich benefit someone like me or any other regular Tom, Dick, or Harry? Well, it doesn't. Aside from maybe being a sort of inspirational tale saying that, yeah,
I'm
if
here
you're
as
willing
representative
to sleep in your car for 3
the longest
years,
tenured faction in
pursue
WWE,
your calling in whatever field that the Lord, Black Jesus, has given you, you too can be disgustingly wealthy by middle age.
There's even a gift basket coming for you and your hurt
the
business
data
friends.
tells us,
Full
generally
disclosure,
speaking,
Retribution broke up
it
before we
don't
could
work
give them
like
theirs.
Thanks.
And that, folks, is the first point of black capitalism.
If you ever
that
need
I
any tips
really
on how to
wanna
stick together as long as the
and
New Day
that's
has,
using
just let me
individual
know.
achievement as a
Faction longevity and
barometer for
continuity not only
collective
equals
black
success
wealth.
in
So
the
remember
ring,
that
but
joke I
also
told in the
mainly
Believe
been
video
focused
about
on
the
in-ring
importance of
success.
Obama's presidency
think
being
bigger.
a little
Hurt business
overblown in the
branded
decade
suits,
since
collared
his
shirts,
ended?
pleated
Well,
pants,
the same rule
shiny
applies
shoes.
to he and his family being used
Maybe
as
your faction
virtually
doesn't
the
lend itself
standard
as
for
well to
black
merchandising,
excellence in our
but
time.
maybe
I
it's
mean,
something as simple as being on
look
the
at
cover
this
of
photo,
the
guys. This is the
WWE
kind of
2K
thing
video
that
game.
Booker T.
New Day
Washington's
has that
wet
honor
dream
this
Why
year.
is New Day on the cover
And if
of
you
the
don't
game?
know who that is,
Hurt Business
why
has the Raw
on
Tag Team
God's green earth
Championships.
are you watching
And
this
New
video?
Day is a
See, the
proven
problem with
commodity.
using Obama
We've
as a
held tag team
barometer
gold over
for
10 times,
collective
and we'll
black
get those back soon
achievement
enough.
is the same as using
Maybe
Obama as the
I'll even
barometer
take
for the
your
political climate,
Intercontinental
which is
Championship
exactly
too.
what white liberals did in the 8 years following his election until old
That feels like a
Tangerine
threat.
Testes made the most
Maybe the Hurt Business
improbable
will
run
have to
to the
pay
White
New
House
Day a
ever
visit
seen
too.
since the kid
You
who
know,
became
just a
president.
thank you for the kind welcome.
And still,
Now
Donald
that
is only
feels
half
like
as
a
qualified as he is.
But I'm kind of
Believe it or
busy,
not,
you know,
despite the
merch,
increasing
game
number
stuff.
of black
So I'm
million
gonna
and billionaires in America, the wealth gap is still widening. I mean, you didn't think that white folks just stopped being rich once Niggas in Paris came out, did you? For reference, in 1992, the percentage of black Americans whose wealth exceeded $1 million was right around 1%. By 2016, that percentage was a little less than 2%.
That's gonna look
Conversely, the percentage of white Americans whose wealth exceeded $1 million in 92 was 7%. By 2016, that percentage jumped to
2%.
I mean, yeah, $1 million of today's money can't buy you nearly as many NDAs as it would in the early 90s, or else Brittany Renner wouldn't be famous. But my point is, using the number of black millionaires in existence as a indicator of how far we've come as a people is grossly overestimated. Just like Obama. And just as an interesting little sidebar, when I do use the word billionaire in a vacuum, who are the first people that you think of? Bezos, Zoidberg, Vegas, Buffett, Tweet Decker, McHairplug. What do all of those folks have in common? They're all not entertainers, obviously. Except Musk, who is basically just Arthur Fleck, except with enough money to con people into laughing at him for the toady factor alone. Now, what if I added a qualifier on there like
a
black
open communication?
Who are the first people that you think of? Jay, Ye, Forehead
New Day
Almighty.
threatened us. So I
What
didn't
do
really
all
have
of
a
those
choice.
folks have
I had
in
to show
common
them what the Hurt
besides
Business is all about.
substantial amounts of
Not
melanation?
how this works. You
They're
might be the
all
rock,
entertainers,
CEO, but we are
primarily.
a team.
I mean, even if you want to use people like Oprah, Bob Johnson, Tyler Perry,
You went along with his
their wealth
short-sighted plan.
came primarily through the entertainment industry in some way, shape, form, or capacity. I mean, even if you want to use Michael Jordan as an example, his $1 billion came primarily because of his glorious bald head and atrocious sense of style being broadcast into our living rooms for the late 80s and duration of the 90s. And that time he spent in DC that we don't talk about, just like Bruno. And yeah, there are certain connotations attached to associating black excellence with entertainment, but we can't escape the fact that a disproportionate amount of black elites come from the entertainment industry when compared to white wealth. Let me put it this way. Only 5% of the top 0.1% of financial elites in America are entertainers. Most of the wealthiest people in the world come from the quote-unquote super manager class, so corporate executives and the like. Let me put it this way for greater reference. Of the Forbes 2022 400 wealthiest in America list, the top 40 control $1.75 trillion worth of wealth combined. So 44% of the entire list, and not one of them was a person of color. In fact, Robert S. Smith, you know, the guy who pledged to pay off the student loan debt of the entirety of Morehouse's 2019 class, is the first person who should show up on the list at the 128th spot with his $6.7 billion worth of wealth. Why he doesn't show up, I don't know, aside from a word that starts with R and ends with ism. Recidivism, obviously. And yeah, for the heck of it, I did go ahead and check to see where Ye and Jay would line up on this list, and they don't. In fact, Queen Wealth herself, Oprah Winfrey, barely makes it with her $2.7 billion, qualifying her for a tie at the 388th spot, which again, why is she not on this list? Also, I did check to see where Rihanna would be on this list, even though her being a citizen of Barbados disqualifies her, and her $1.7 billion also doesn't crack the top 400. But her forehead might. My point is, even among the richest of rich blacks in America, even when their powers combine, it's not even enough to make a few decimal points in the collective wealth of not just this country, but this world's wealthiest wealth workers. And for the ones that do, most of them didn't climb the corporate ladder to do so. And frankly, when you look at this list, most of the white folks didn't either. And that's the point that I want y'all to bookmark for later. Like a Ruby Rose thirst trap. No, I am not ashamed. But again, in a general sense, of course, the most practical method of becoming sticky rich in this country is securing one of those cushy corporate executives, I'd say. Well, surprise, surprise, of the S&P Fortune 500 list, only 2.6% of those folks are black. And additionally, only 1% of corporate blacks are even in striking distance of one of those other positions. So, as oxymoronic as it sounds, as a black, of course, you actually have a better chance striking it rich, getting discovered on SoundCloud one day or something, than you do accruing tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt, getting that business degree that your parents bullied you out of the house into getting. And even then, your chances are still smaller than Puff Daddy's teeth. Either beating that 5% of the 0.1% of this country's fiscal elites that are celebrities, most of them are white. Because stops the kick. What I'm saying is, if you're black in America, barring some substantial systemic change, you're basically wrong. I mean, that is, unless you strike gold exaggerating your crack game clout, only to then one day wind up hiring a known DEA informant as the CEO of your media conglomerate. Or alternatively, you can make a living milking 80-year-old church mothers, middle-aged white women, and equal parts desperate and lonely single ladies into mistaking your old man yelling at clouds brand of humor for some kind of folksy wisdom. Or you could always just dress in drag. I'm never going to work in Hollywood, am I? Now, some of y'all might be sitting there saying, but Billiam, just because my odds of becoming a black billionaire are slim to none doesn't mean that we should just throw out the black capitalist baby with the bathwater. That's infanticide. And I mean, yeah, it kind of is, but that's beside the point, which is that the vast majority of folk who are ultra-rich are non-PhDs for a very specific reason. And that's because, just like I said earlier, the majority of the ultra-wealthy are so because they either inherited it or they were just born into it. Which I mean is very, but whatever. Moving on. My point is, it's a lot easier to build off of old money than it is to just create new dollars out of thin air. And despite this, and probably so, black folks have found a way to do just that, historically speaking. I mean, this is despite the dismantling of the Freedmen's Bureau, which, if y'all don't know, is pretty much kind of a national startup fund for the newly emancipated, which, ironically enough, is the same kind of policy that all of those Cuban expats who voted for Trump benefited from when they fled Castro. Also, the repeal of Special Order Number 15, which is where the whole 40 acres thing comes from. Which, if you didn't know this, when that order was repealed, there were already a ton of newly emancipated folk who had already settled on the land that had been set aside for them. And the feds just came in and kicked them out because niggers, obviously, and also redlining and a bunch of other banking and zoning codes that I'm not going to waste time getting into here. But my point is almost improbably so, or actually literally improbably so, black folks still found a way to create substantial communal wealth in places like Seneca Hill and the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, aka Black Wall Street. I mean, that is until white people got pissed off enough to burn it to the ground or build Central Park over top of it. Remember that the next time you're watching Home Alone 2. So now here we are at the early parts of the mid-20th century where black people are prevented not only by the letter of the actual law, but by the threat of literal physical violence from even attempting anything close to upward socioeconomic mobility. So, no, Steve, the reason why poor people are poor is not because of their sleeping habits, but because of laws that were created to keep them that way for no other reason than the color of their skin. And the most frustrating part about it is that people like Steve and Cube and Killer Mike, for that matter, have made something of second careers of themselves, giving advice out to black folks that in some way, shape, or form boils down to another sermon on saving a bunch of money that we don't have in order to invest in ventures that we wouldn't be able to afford, let alone keep up with anyway. And it's frustrating because folks like this, I assume they mean well, but they're just ill-equipped to give out such advice with such hubris at that. For the same reason that you don't see 90-year-old church mothers passing out tracts at the local speakeasy anymore. They've been removed from that life for so long that they no longer speak the language of the people from whence they come. Kind of like Jake Sully. Don't cap, you know you flash that guitar. Because let's keep it moving. For as much as Steve loves to tell that story about he being homeless for 3 years in order to pursue his career in comedy, let's not forget that he left some pretty well-paying jobs in order to do that. And also, this was the early 90s. This is how much the wealth gap has increased from rich to poor since then. Also, it bears mentioning that the main reason why he was so poor is because 75% of his income was going to his then estranged first wife, but hey, I guess that doesn't make for as inspirational a soundbite for his morning radio show, now does it? From the time that I was a wee lad, I've been hearing this point being espoused by everyone in my family, from the diet hoteps with the tattoos on their forehead like some kind of BHI Ash Wednesday, to the members of my family who would most definitely be grand old partiers if they weren't, you know, the color of a paper bag. And that's that the key to unlocking communal black wealth is for us to simply buy and bank black. I mean, we do control more than $1 trillion in spending power. And see, that right there is the issue, folks. This point sounds good in a vacuum, except actually it doesn't sound good even in that context. Just like everything else Hoteps believe. Sorry, Auntie. See, black capitalist talking points are kind of like the Brooklyn Nets, circa 2021 to 23. How, you may ask? Well, because separately they're irksome enough, but when their powers combine, they are utterly insufferable. How, you may ask? Well, they're equal parts obnoxious and self-assured, despite never doing anything of substance together besides hijacking and derailing an otherwise productive and healthy culture, only to then chunk the deuces when the water got too hot. Am I still talking about black capitalists? No, I don't know. Just move on to the next one. So back to that spending power point, which, if you ask me, is the Kyrie of the bunch, just for how wrong it is. But more than just how wrong it is, it irks me because so many people cite it as a reputable point, because either they don't know better, or if we're just going to keep it a buck, they're too lazy to do the legwork and really find out where that information is coming from. Otherwise, they realize it's bunk to begin with. So, yeah, just like Kyrie. See, here's the problem with this point, aside from there not really being a real way for us to substantiate it, unless we, try to complete data to make our point, which is exactly how we got this point to begin with. Spending power does not equate directly to wealth. I mean, if you don't believe me, just ask all of those Section 8 residents who bought Renaissance tickets with a Klarna or a firm loan. See, most of that 1 or 2 or however many trillions of dollars is supposed to be now is already tied up into things like rent, mortgage, utilities, the things that you need to keep a roof over your head. Also, everyday items like gas, groceries, anal beads, the necessities. And whatever you have left over after you spend all of that is how wealthy you are. Which, let's keep it a buck, for most of us, ain't that much. And that's why 70% of the average American's wealth is directly correlated to the value of their primary residence. My point is that trillions of dollars of spending power, Mark, is just a marketing gimmick used by corporate capitalists to get you to spend money that you don't really have to make them richer. Well, I mean, some of them are probably black, so I guess it's all a wash. And this doesn't even mention debt, by the way. Did you know that the average black degree holder owes $52,000 in student loan debt, which is $25,000 more than the average white borrower? Additionally, black degree holders report on average owing 12.5% more in student loan debt 4 years out from graduation than they did on commencement day. This is due to a number of factors, including many black folks, women especially, believing that it's necessary for them to attain an advanced degree in order to overqualify themselves against peers who are non-black and or non-female. And I mean, when you look at this, where to lie at? But also the fact that black college students typically come from lower income backgrounds than their white peers. For reference, a black degree holder can expect to make $30,000 a year more on average than a white with a high school diploma, again, generally speaking. However, that same black can expect to make $20,000 a year less than a white with comparable education. What I'm saying is, even if Johnny and Jalil grew up in the same zip code, went to the same schools, and even went to the same college or grew up on the same block for that matter, chances are Jalil is probably going to have a much harder time financing his degree without a Pell Grant or pole dancing lessons. And while we're here, let's just go ahead and dispel the whole model minority myth that people like Enos Freedom have managed to make a second career out of because they suck so badly at their original profession. Yeah, while Asian American households at face value are the most wealthy and educated POCs in this country, once you look past the surface hype, the narrative kind of falls apart. Just like the 2023 Brooklyn Nets. According to the Pew Research Center, Asian American households average about $85,000 a year annually, with 54% of those households having at least one degree holder. However, only Sri Lankans, Filipinos, and Indians make on average more than that $85,000 mark a year, with Indians coming in at a whopping $127,000 a year. In fact, according to the Pew Research Center, Asian Americans are the most disparate ethnic group when it comes to economic strength, with the top 10% making on average 10.7 times more than the bottom 10 percentile a year. My point being that whole model minority myth is faker than George Washington's front teeth or a Brooklyn Nets championship run. But while we're here, let's go ahead and debunk another black capitalist point that's not nearly as prominent as the first one, but it is equally as irksome for different reasoning, and that being the black dollar circulation myth. I call this one the Ben Simmons of the group. Why? Well, because in a vacuum, everyone knows that it's pretty much worthless alone. But when coupled with more heralded and celebrated points, it does have the potential to contribute some value. At least that's what folks think, until they're inevitably disappointed by how little it actually does with that potential. I will never forgive you for this, Ben. You know you've heard it before. The black dollar only circulates in community for 24, 12, 2, however many hours it's supposed to be. And this is always juxtaposed to communities like Asian Americans and especially Jews. And yeah, that's not problematic at all. I mean, aside from how blatantly racist it is, what makes this point problematic is that, again, it can't be substantiated, even more so than that spending power mark that I talked about earlier. So much and so that a nonprofit organization called Truth Be Told ran out of Howard University's Communications and Journalism department, took the necessary steps to try and to track down where this figure came, because I hate to break it to you folks, nobody keeps that kind of data. In fact, when Truth Be Told tried to track down exactly where this figure came from, they wound up as, surprise, surprise, a black wealth building guy from 1996 by author Brooke Stevens, who said that she got the figure from a guy named Lee Green, who ironically enough allegedly was employed by Howard University at some point, despite, Howard having no record of anybody by that name working for them in any capacity, maybe as a custodian. So now, folks, we can get to the main event, and that's debunking the Kevin Durant of the group, and that is the just buy black myth. Why is this one reserved for Kevin? Well, because by itself is actually got some pretty decent merit to it, except, again, when it's done in isolation, hasn't really done much of note, besides piss a bunch of other people off by how thin-skinned and even more thinly scalped it is. First of all, it should be more obvious than the reason why your biggest OnlyFans contributor bought a plane ticket for you to his city for y'all to hang out, that black folks face a disparate amount of obstacles when even attempting to start a business. The main one being the lack of start-up most of us have to start a business. First of all, black people just don't have the same kind of credential clout that their white peers do because black, duh, genius. This is why, according to a 2016 Fed Small Business Report, 58% of black-owned businesses reported experiencing some level of difficulty acquiring business credit, as opposed to 32% of their white peers. Additionally, according to a 2019 Atlanta Fed report, despite black folks having the highest self-reported revenue growth expectation, they were also significantly less likely to receive business credit than their white peers. All of that aside, though, even if every black entrepreneur, aspiring or otherwise, did get the kind of funding they were seeking, there simply aren't enough of them to make a significant dent in the wealth gap. For reference, 71% of American businesses are white-owned compared to the 9.5% that are black and the 12.2% that are Latino. However, those white-owned businesses control 88% of overall sales and 86.5% of employment, leaving blacks with only 1.9% of sales and 1.7% of employment, and Latinos with 4% of sales and 4.2% of employment. What this means is in order for POC-owned businesses to be represented proportionately to our distribution of the workforce, we would need to create 1.1 million new POC-owned businesses that employ 9 million people and that generate $300 billion worth of worker income. And see, that's the catch right there, folks. That Fugazi LLC that you used to apply for that PPP loan a few years ago, that doesn't count. You gotta be a business that employs at least one other person at a reasonable wage aside from the owner. Which, again, you need startup capital to do that if you're first starting out. I mean, unless you got kids, and I mean, there are laws against that, but it never stopped Bob Belcher, now did it? Or my dad, for that matter. Which is why I started playing football 4 years too late for it to matter. Still waiting on that check, bucko. 67% of firms that don't employ anyone but the owner generate less than $25,000 a year. And again, if you're the owner of this business and that is your sole source of income, you're pretty much living in poverty. So my point is, who is this business's very existence benefiting anyway? And that's about as good a defense as you're going to get when your PPP fraud trial begins. Even with all that being said, business ownership doesn't necessarily close the wealth gap between POCs and whites, because on average, those businesses are not valued as much as white-owned firms for a variety of reasons, but including the fact that those businesses are more likely to actually employ someone other than the owner, which means they're more likely to generate respectable sales, which means that the owner can actually afford to eat dinner every now and again. Again, the reason for all of this is because white men who, surprise, surprise, represent a disproportionate amount of business owners are just born into a situation where they're just gifted the startup needed to get off the ground. Which, need I remind y'all, is the reason most businesses fail in the first place. They don't have enough money at jump to sustain them through that awkward, I don't really know what I'm doing phase until they can make a profit, which might take as much as half a decade to do. And no, it's not just the Andy Sambergs and the Jeff Luthors of the world either. According to a 2010 study conducted by the Minority-Owned Business Development Association, the average white-owned firm started out with $106,000 of capital, while the average BOB started out with a little over $35,000. Again, unless you're selling blow or booty, you're pretty much getting up to be let down. Now, with all of that aside, realistically speaking, black-owned businesses just aren't equipped to compete directly with white-owned firms. For reference, Walmart, the largest private employer in America, employs 2.2 million more employees than the top 100 black-owned businesses combined and generates more revenue than all 2.58 million black-owned businesses put together. My point is, we can't just buy our way out of bondage. It doesn't work that way, no matter what Killer Mike or Doughboy has to say. But, Billiam, I hear you saying as you clutch your copy of Shonda Rhimes' Year of Yes close to your chest, what about banking black? Well, did you hear what I just said about black-owned businesses? Why would you think any of that would change just because the last B in Bob has changed from business to bank? For reference, JP Morgan and Chase controls $2 trillion worth of assets alone. The top 5 black-owned banks control $2.3 billion combined, which, I mean, may be enough to cover the collective BBL bills for Fulton and DeKalb counties, but it's not nearly enough for black folks to compete directly with white wealth because, again, it was robbed from us at jump. I mean, let's just go back to that 1.4 trillion whatever amount of spending power we're supposed to have. Still, that's a little over only half the amount that is controlled by JP Morgan and Chase alone. Like, do you truly believe that we have enough money to compete directly with white wealth hoarding with the state that we're in now? I mean, if you believe that, then you probably heard it from a celebrity, in which case you probably also trust a man with 3 failed marriages to give you relationship advice. So, yeah, there you have that. But, William, what about financial literacy? What about personal responsibility? What about hashtag Mamba mentality, hustle, grind time mindset? The problem isn't literal centuries of bad fiscal policy designed to keep black people in a perpetual state of disenfranchisement for just being black, but it's men who think it's okay to have locks longer than their wives and who don't know how to fix a catalytic converter, or it's women who don't wear makeup and wear baggy pants because they secretly want to be a man but still want to be treated like a lady, or it's giving up the D and or P during the first week of the relationship because evidently sex is about power and not pleasure. And I swear to God, I am so sick to death of this same anti-black gender war bullshit being grifted by small-minded people who think that equally small-minded people parroting it makes it make sense.
As a man, like, women should worship. You feel me? Man.
Are you married by chance?
Nah, man, I ain't never had a girlfriend.
Okay.
But what I'm saying, a study conducted by the St. Louis Fed in 2017 concluded that, quote, meager economic circumstances, not poor decision-making or deficit knowledge, constrain choices and leave asset-poor borrowers with little to no other option but to use predatory and abusive alternative financial services. Like, for example, buy here, pay here car loans. And I mean, I grew up on a block with like 5 different used car dealerships, so I'm speaking from experience. You want to know the real reason why the wealth gap exists and just keeps getting larger and larger by the day? It's the same one you think it is. Yeah, the one that your buddies on Twitter who keep sharing Killer Mike clips to con you into buying crypto or trying to convince you is not as big a deal as it actually is. It is estimated that in the 246 years of chattel slavery in North America, blacks were robbed of anywhere between $24 and $97 trillion in wealth. Free labor that this country literally would not exist without. And I really don't feel like arguing with niggas in the comments about how you growing up in some hick town in West Virginia that still uses kerosene and outhouses disqualifies you from being a benefactor of chattel slavery. I'm just going to link this video I did last year and this article by people much smarter than me that says you're full of bull defecate. But I will say that this is the primary reason for the racial wealth gap. and not much has been done to rectify it. And according to polls, only about 1 in 3 of American leftists, right-wing and otherwise, actually care enough to do anything to address it, or at least the one thing that we all know will address it substantially. In addition to slavery, we have to talk about the mismanagement of the Freedmen's Savings Bank, another failed initiative, just like the Freedmen's Bureau and Special Field Order 15, that only failed because of micro-dicked white men. The bank was marketed as a means of wealth generation for newly freed black folks who would generate interest on any amount of money they deposited over $1. Even Frederick Douglass, the bank's president at one point, deposited $10,000 of his own money to help the bank get off the ground before quickly resigning. Why did he resign, you ask? Well, because the all-white, all-male executive board of the bank invested the money in a number of high-risk, highly ill-advised ventures and wound up losing almost all of it because commercial. In fact, 9 years after the bank was established, it closed its doors, costing its depositors more than $3 million of lost money. $82 million in today's money. Now, to be fair, the Feds did set up a program where depositors could recover up to 5% for every dollar they lost. But surprise, surprise, for the third time in this video, most were never able to recover because Negroes. Fred himself said that the bank's failure was the worst thing to happen to Black America since slavery, and before Twitter, obviously. And I haven't even mentioned the Homestead Act, the Social Security Act, or the GI Bill, all of which largely, if not completely, excluded black folks from reaping their benefits. My point is, black capitalism never was and never will be the solution to our collective condition. Because, believe it or not, Black Wall Street, as heralded as it has been, deservedly so, was not completely self-sustaining. Another thing that I'm not going to waste time getting into this video, but you can look it up for yourself. I mean, black capitalism is pretty much just Reaganomics written in Ebonics, and it fails every single time for the same reason that Reaganomics did. It's the same reason why student loan payments have been deferred for perpetuity now, and the same reason why you got that sweet stimulus check
that match won.
And that's that rich people don't spend the money that you give them, they just hoard it. But working and poor people spend money, which drives the economy. And the reason why we spend money is because
just got
you
lucky
gotta
against
spend
you
to eat, and
what I
you
did
gotta
against
eat
Xavier
to
is a
live,
preview of how the
bucko.
tag title match will go.
Why would any of that change just because the color of the capitalist does?
But we wouldn't
Well,
even be in this
like I've
position
been
if we
saying
hadn't gone
for
after
this
the new
entire
day.
video, it
Video
doesn't.
game cover?
Like, practically
The hurt
speaking,
is bigger than
it's
that. We care
impossible to
about
control
championships.
that much wealth as
You
one
put ours
person
in jeopardy
without
after I
some degree of
asked you
exploitation
to
going
focus.
on directly
This may have been a bump in the road,
because
but
of
I
you
know what the
making
end
that much money.
None of this
That Fenty
changes
Braun
that.
panty set of yours that you got for Valentine's Day, yeah, some woman in a sweatshop in Southeast Asia who gets paid like a nickel and a Pepsi a day is responsible for making that. Those Yeezy slides that you're so proud of that look like something off of a JRPG armor set, yeah, some kid in China who probably has a machete up to his neck right now is responsible for making that as well. The bulk of Jay-Z's economic empire has been created due in no small part to his
I look forward to showing
dealings.
you what I'm capable of.
And this, folks, in a lot of ways brings us full circle to the point I made earlier about the inextricableness of black capitalism from the entertainment industry. For all the acclaim that black elites receive from the community for being elite, what have they really done to offset the plight that the vast majority of black Americans face? Okay, Jigga did launch Reform Alliance alongside Meek Mill, and he did call the governor of Minnesota that one time, and he and his bootylicious bae did give millions of dollars to protesters over the years. But he's also proven time and again that profit is his only real politics, just like most entertainers. For in 2017, Jigga the Bigger Figure partnered with Barney and Bash $1,000 crocodile check. Cat, if I could afford, would be the highlight of my Sunday Best Ensemble. However, after calls for him to break his contract with Barney's over his documented history of profiling black customers, Jay opted to instead donate 100% of the money generated from that line to charity. Which, I mean, come on, y'all know that was a little more than a tax write-off at the end of the day. And then there's the aforementioned Barclays deal, if I did mention it, I don't really remember at this point, that was able to gain clout in the community in which it was built largely because of Jay's name recognition. But when the dollars no longer made sense enough for him to stand pat, he pulled out and left a gentrified, creamed pie behind. And didn't even have the decency to lay down a towel first. This isn't even to mention the plethora of rumors circulating about his penchant to leave homies of yesteryear hanging high and dry when they're of no more use to him. What I'm saying is the great men narrative used to prop up the black capitalist narrative just doesn't compute. Because even if these folks pump 100% of their wealth back into the community, it's still not good enough. And a part of them, I think, knows this. But they use that narrative to make themselves feel better about the fact that the community is the reason they got to where they are in the first place.
Okay, so y'all can kind of tell by the flow of this video that I wasn't really going to focus too much on any one black capitalist because one, they're all pretty much the same nigga, and B, highlighting the shady business practices of individual billionaires and practically a subgenre of commentary into itself now. And the only reason I even mentioned Jay specifically was because of how those two acts specifically are the easiest examples I could think of how contradictory black billionaires are. Well, I'm sorry, y'all. I gotta come for Rihanna specifically. Not because I have anything against her personally. I mean, besides her giving Big Red and TV extra time to scheme adjustments for the second half of the Super Bowl that they wouldn't have had the time to do, if not for that mid-ass halftime show. But I'm gonna keep it a buck with y'all. I thought that all of us anywhere left of Elon ejaculate swallowers were kind of on the same page when it came to the billionaire class. But like, for real, what the actual F is this? Like, I know y'all are beauty blogs primarily, but y'all really should know better than this. Matter of fact, y'all being a beauty blog, y'all should be the main ones blowing the trumpet in defiance of the benevolent billionaire princess image that Rihanna and her PR team crafted over the years. Okay, so like most people I mentioned earlier, Rihanna's journey to ultra wealth began in entertainment. But I gave before her, Rihanna didn't even come close to crossing the billionaire threshold until she branched out into other avenues, specifically beauty and fashion. The beauty industry is just as, if not more, notorious than tech and fashion when it comes to human rights violations. For reference, Fenty beauty products use a mineral called mica, the vast majority of which is found in India, the vast majority of which is produced by unregulated mines in India. The vast majority of which is produced by unregulated mines in India that utilize child laborers who get paid anywhere between 29 and 42 US cents a day while working in extremely hazardous conditions. And if any of this sounds like deja vu to you, then congratulations, you probably watched that video I did about Musk a while back. Here, have a cookie for your efforts. In 2021, Binya Joshi of the NGO National Rights Observatory filed a complaint with the National Commission for the Protection of Children, alleging that Fenty was using mica produced by mines where, quote, child laborers work in dire conditions. A spokesperson for Fenty said that the company does not personally audit its suppliers, but, quote, expects its direct product suppliers to adhere to and to implement our suppliers' code of conduct. So, yeah, basically this is a textbook case of passing the buck. And nigga, like, I had to have done like 2 or 3 videos telling y'all that this is social capitalism 101 by now. But, I mean, if we really want to keep it a buck, it really don't matter how many videos I or anybody else doing, because stands, man. Stands are the most willfully stupid people on the planet. Like, Rihanna could literally walk out on stage and sacrifice a baby to an effigy of Dagon, and I guarantee it'll start an entire discourse on Twitter about postpartum abortion rights.
And y'all think I'm joking, but Speak literally made a whole video about y'all, and y'all called him a Nazi for it. And you know why? Because y'all are such simps for streamers that you don't know the difference between actual fascism and just checking niggas for saying stuff online that will probably get their fronts busted in real life. Yeah, I said it, nigga, and don't worry, I got plenty of slugs in the clip if you feeling froggy. In order for capitalism to work, at least on the scale that we have it now, you have to have a class of haves and a class of have-not, a class of exploiters and a class of folk being exploited. And I hate to break it to you folks, whenever there's exploitation going on, people of color are always disproportionately impacted by that. So it doesn't matter how hotep Kanye is or is not. And it doesn't matter how many plus-size, body-positive lingerie sets Rihanna produces. At the end of the day, even if inadvertently, their wealth hoarding brings harm directly to the people that they're supposed to be examples for. So the question you probably have now is, well, smart guy, how do you propose we fix the system? Well, honestly, I don't have any proposals for y'all. I'm not going to waste my time trying to figure out a solution to this problem. That's what y'all got to say. But my point is to say, for the love of blacks, can y'all please stop letting Steve Harvey tell you that the reason you're poor is because you haven't prayed hard enough? I mean, if that were the way that it really works, then I can guarantee you that Lori would be Steve's favorite son.
And he stops the count for his partner. This is just vicious. Break his arm. Vicious. How you punish your opponent. Both wrists fractured. Nasty. Oh, that hurt right in the kidney. Golly. And Locke gets surprised there.
The number of flights that we have to do is raising South Africa corporate fires. They stated the number of Africans enslaved in the United States and in the American colonies before that put together.
Why the f*** you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God. Stop lying.
Well, folks, now that we've gotten our obligatory cold open out of the way, by we, I really mean me, can get down to explaining to you how me even decided to jump down this rabbit hole that's not going to be time and effort that it took to go down it once all of the right-wing reverse racism remedials hit my comment section and spend an entire paragraph of a comment explaining to me how the Irish and Chinese had it so much worse than black folks for the first 2.5 centuries of this country's history. Let me take this opportunity to apologize to black folks have not giving a dog think what you think and or feel, bucko. Anyway, the impetus for me even doing this video was a few, and by few I mean literally like 2 requests that I got to do a Thomas Sowell video, and I wasn't going to do it until I remembered that I spent like a half hour talking about house niggas already. For those of you who don't know, Thomas Sowell is just Lisa Whitlock with a lap band. And that is your one per list. Jokes aside, Thomas Sowell is pretty much just Jordan Peterson, but the chocolate variety. What I mean is that he's just another run-of-the-mill conservative ideologue who uses his scholastic credentials to make his stupid sound smart, or at least smart enough to make conservatives conjure his name whenever they need a contrarian color to co-sign them whenever Candace Owens is too busy shopping for a curl activator that actually works. Spoilers, not a so for those of y'all who don't remember or are new to the channel, and that aforementioned house nigga video, I introduced a concept called the side-eye spectrum. Trademark tiers of blacks with suspect political and social takes. One of these tiers was that of the respectables. Respectable is just a term that I use for black folks who don't so much deny that systemic racism exists, so much as they say that that's a thing. Those injustices still exist, and the best way to address them would be for black folks to make our blackness as palatable to white tastes and sensibilities as possible. And, I mean, they're not completely wrong. I mean, how many job interviews do you think that I've gotten and they told you I mean have one of the most generically white first names in human history?
His arm showed on the mat before one.
Oh,
it's unthinkable. Someone beating the
an example of respectable things. Tim Scott or Bill Cosby's famous pound cakes, or basically everything said by pre-Trayvon Martin, Don Lemon. That being said, just because something is doesn't necessarily mean that it should be. Like Morbius, or the first Suicide Squad, or pretty much anything Jared Leto has been involved in since 30 Seconds to Mars. My point is that Sal is not completely wrong with his takes, just mostly, especially whenever his takes have to do with any field of study not called economics. And this, folks, is when he goes full house nigga. And you never go full house nigga. Just don't do it. So I'm not like an expert in economics, but he's going to pick it.
Hey, baby. What you doing, beautiful? You just ate what? Oh, yeah, dinner? How was it? Yeah. Spaghetti always tastes better the next day. I said spaghetti always tastes better the next day. Playing the game. I'm on YouTube. You can see it. I'm on YouTube. Yeah.
Save just in a nick of time. He gets sent down to the floor. All the way up. Oh no. Good night.
Trying to. Yeah, I ate some soups. Soup. Some soup. With some eggs and some chips.
Thrown back in under the ropes. He made the tag. Cooking with gas.
I didn't have no chips for me.
With his opponent.
That's what I did.
The champ is down. Title change. I can feel it.
Them little, they don't even put no chips in them bags.
Nasty right hand.
Get 3 chips, you're done.
Not in a great place. Yeah, they stuck it out through this match, but it wouldn't hurt to go for the tag soon here.
They shouldn't even call these chips. They should call it chip.
There he goes, right into the corner. Oh, right to the bottom. Incredible. Roll through. Into the bridge. Go for the win. And they're still in this. Pin attempt for the championship.
I love you more, babe. How you day going? How was your house check?
That won't beat him. I'm not sure anything.
How was your house check?
I told you I'm moving here at 2:45.
Oh.
Still only got one. You expect these pins to last much. Shoulders down. Championship of the line. He got the shot up in time. Look
Look at the look on his opponent's face, Cole. He can't believe it. Kick to the stomach puts an end to that. Big E looks like a sitting duck right now. Ah, look at this. To the arm. Snapmare takedown.
I think the paradigm has shifted. Cover. And he makes the save for his team. Looking to lock it in here. Outright presentation of power there. You can feel him desperately trying to find a way, and he does.
This is stupid. There's some cheesy shit right there.
Tag is made. What do these two have in store? Flying shoulder block. Oh, man. Costly error there.
Look at some cheesy stuff right there.
And pulled in tight. Wow, side suplex. That's not the way anyone's body should. You can feel him desperately trying to find a way, and he does.
How's that for a counter? Ooh, skull rattling. Challenger's a little worse for wear now. The lock is focused on finishing this. Ooh, jarring right hand. Wow, somersault unprettier. Gonna see a new champ. Shows the knee to the face. That'll stop you.
Big E not worried a bit about the competition.
He has been with the championship on the line. No, he gets the shoulder up.
So close. That could have been it.
I love you too, baby.
Landing face first. All the way up. Oh, no.
How your day been going so far?
Woods is thinking big here.
And Xavier Woods says it's time to turn up.
Yeah, dude. That's crazy.
Shot after shot. Ruthless striking. Any more hits in that area could leave him dizzy. Rolling elbow finds its mark. Ouch. From the top.
Look at his teeth.
Well, that's one way to leave the ring, I suppose. That was brutal, and now the blood is flowing from the Lock's face.
Oh my God. This one I made is a lot more closer to me. I didn't make him a heavyweight. It's looking a lot smaller.
Showing him what a real alpha male looks like. Not the position you want to be in right now. He has the task at hand, but prefers to be showboating right now.
Today? Okay, so maybe we can get it. We can get a hold of her.
Kick out after one from the challenger. Still in it. What a gutsy performance.
And he gets home on time.
Kick after kick after kick. Whoa, and a roundhouse to cap the with the championship on the line. The rope stopped the pin. Pin attempt for the championship. Kicks out after one. Still not enough to put him away.
This shit is crazy.
It's locked in. This is a great way to win. I thought they had it won, but he makes the save.
I got it on normal. This shit like it's on hard.
Now the opponent and a double axe handle smash. Oh, strong impact. Tag man. I think something bad is about to happen to their opponent. There they go. The title might change hands. Yeah, I thought it was over, but again. Can we please get some control? Lockside coming. And the piston-like right hands. Good night. Wow, and now Kofi is masked with blood. And what he's looking for here looks like a potential submission maneuver coming. Oh, into the camel clutch. And there's the save.
God.
They're going to lock it in here. Sinking deep into the camel clutch. The official asking him, is he going to tap? Is he going to tap out? He's trying to hold on, but for how long? You can feel him desperately.
This nigga is brilliant. Out.
Big E tagged in. Tagging his partner in now. Quick strike to the lower body. Knew what Gabriel had coming. Shoulder clothesline. He turns it around. Collar and arm drag. Oh, man. Punch across the cheek. The champion into the cover. How can that be fair? Come on, ref. Keep these guys in check. Placed into the corner. Oh, right to the... Both arms trapped into the crucifix. Shoulders down. And he kicks out of the pin and one. Oh, Big E avoids contact.
What'd you say, babe? Love you. I love you, babe.
Other economists on Sal. He's less a true blue economist than he is just a, again, conservative ideologue with some economist clout. So pretty much the equivalent of what Jordan Peterson is to psychology. And again, this is reflected in literally anything he has to say on anything that's not economics.
No doubt about it. The better superstar definitely won tonight.
You were like me and had the pleasure of the bulk of your junior high school years in a white evangelical private school. It was just called the 5th grade history exam. And y'all wonder why I'm so emotionally well put together now. Okay, so I'm not going to bother refuting every single one of Sal's claims in this series because, frankly, like most of the stuff that I talk about on this channel, a simple Google search could do a much better job of doing that than I ever could. But one point that he does that kind of piqued my interest was the whole Arabs did it first thing. And again, as I said in the previous video on The Boys, which you should definitely check out if you haven't already, in every good lie, there is at least a kernel of truth in there somewhere. Still, this claim is basically like all of those girls who saw the first season of Teen Moms and decided that the quickest route to fortune and fame would be to develop a baby bump of their own. That was not the lesson that was supposed to get from that. So let's go ahead and unpack this whole Arabs did it first thing, shall we? While, yeah, Arabs were the first people to justify the enslavement of black people based on their blackness, it's not nearly as simple as black skin's bad. Like I've said in past videos, divisions in the ancient world weren't based on skin color so much as they were based on what tribe and or region of the world.
All right, love you.
So, Greek philosophers like Plato, Ptolemy, and Hippocrates taught and believed not only physical characteristics like skin color, height, and dick size, obviously, but also temperament. Hippocrates of Kos, no relation, says in On Airs, Waters, and Places that people who come from temperate climates tended to be sluggish and not apt for work, while those who come from extreme climates tended to be sturdy and vigilant and industrious. He also says that people who come from mountainous, rugged, and elevated regions of the world tended to be warlike and enterprising, while those who come from level, windy, and well-watered parts of the world were unmanly and gentle. Yes, that explains London, doesn't it? But back to Arabia for a second. The Arabs' first contact with Africans, or if you want to be a pedantic dickhead about it, black Africans, was with the ancient kingdom of Aksum, the predecessor to modern-day Ethiopia, which at its height stretched into the lower half of the Arabian Peninsula. And based on the contemporary Arab sources and imagery that we have, the Arabs' idea of Africans at the time was that of a powerful warrior society, which, I mean, makes sense. Every time they squared up with Aksum, they pretty much got folded like an origami fortune teller.
A terrific striker, a master purveyor of high-flying, innovative offense. AJ Styles has competed at this level. By the time the Romans and Persians had established themselves as the big bad bosses on the block, the relationship between the Ottomanites and the Arabians shifted from Tom and Jerry to Tom and Zendaya. In fact, by the 6th century CE, the Arabs had pushed the Ottomanites out of the Arabian Peninsula and back across the sea. And even by the time we get to the 8th century, the Arabs had crossed the sea themselves and had Allah Akbar their way into conquest of Egypt and extended the Caliphate's borders as far west as the Atlantic Ocean and as far south as the ancient kingdom of Dongola in modern-day Sudan. And his opponent.
And this is me desperately resisting the urge to make a dick joke. Joke aside, though, this is very important for our story because Dongola, a Christian kingdom, by the way, was one of, if not the primary gateway for two of the factors that would greatly influence Arabian ideas on race and racism. Those being Greek philosophy and black slaves. So, you remember how Europeans dredged up a bunch of classical ideas from the Greeks and Romans and then ran it through easy bit real quick and changed a few sentences here and there and called it the Renaissance? Well, just like algebra and regular bathing, evidently the Arabs did that first too. Arab scholars were very heavily influenced by the Greeks. Just about every school of academic thought that didn't involve a hypotenuse. This is very much reflected in the writings of such Arab scholars as Al-Hamdani. Cites Ptolemy directly in his assessment of the races, how they differ, and how they came to be. Even Bulan, who divides sub-Saharan, i.e. black Africans, into 4 distinct races based on what region of sub-Saharan Africa they come from. And the much later Arab scholar, Ibn Khaldun, who, in an attempt to refute another very popular theory on race that we'll come back to later, regurgitates the Greeks' idea of geographical racial distinctions or whatever.
You only know peoples of West Africa to the south of their distance and safety They're only humans who are closer to dumb animals than rational beings. They live in thickets and caves and earth and unprepared ground. They frequently eat each other. They cannot be considered human beings. Therefore, the Negro nations are, as a rule, submissive to slavery, because Negroes have little that is essentially human and possess attributes that are quite similar to those of dumb animals, as we've stated.
One Persian scholar, using their proximities to the equator as justification, says that black people's brains were burnt by the sun, and that white folks were half-baked.
The Iraqis have evolved something they'll want to keep up prematurely with a blonde shirtish color, with gray blue eyes and wedged eyebrows, such as occur to the wombs of the Slavic, or those like them more comparable to them. The wombs of their women do not overcook them until they are burnt, so that the child comes out some black or pitch black.
That is the attitude of a daredevil. The ability to take risks with minimal trepidation. No fear, absolute reckless abandon. And the Locks maintaining the advantage now. AJ's got to assert himself.
I don't really have to write a punchline for that, should I? To further support the idea that our modern understanding of race and racism originates in Greek philosophy, may I refer you to French physician Francois Bernier, who sometime in the 1680s also divided peoples up into distinct races based on region. Bernier, like the Arabs, argued that geography was the primary factor in determining traits like skin color, height, etc., etc., even though it's kind of blurry because he does accept that black folks are going to be black folks regardless of where and how they're born. But unlike the Arabs, he argues that Europeans are at the top of the racial hierarchy. Surprise, surprise! But just like one of the worst brain drainage in the country's history brought on by a decades-long recession, in other words, just another big opinion. We ain't done with the Greeks yet, buckos. This is Aristotle's. This is the Greek supremacy himself. The guy that taught Colin Farrell that it was his duty, his destiny to Hellenize the entire rest of the world and force the rest of us to wear togas and eat better for the rest of our lives under the threat of mass genocide. But you see, that's not the only reason why Aristotle would have been right at home on a Prager U guest speaker list.
Those who are as different as the soul from the body or man's of east, and they are in the state of their work as the use of the body, and if this is the best that can come from them, are slaves by nature. For them, it is better to be ruled in accordance with the soul of the
You see, it's Aristotle and not Nietzsche where the whole master-slave morality thing really originates. This guy practically sick, not just for slavery, but slave masters themselves. Anyway, Aristotle believed that slaves, whether they were sales or otherwise, were inherently inferior to their masters. Why? Because they wouldn't be slaves after all. Aristotle surmised that slaves lacked the temperament to function in civilized society without the guiding, paternalistic hand of their master leading them along the way lest they wander into the Mediterranean and drown. Furthermore, he argued that slave masters, by virtue of their philosophy, I guess, should be given the right to determine all the rules and regulations, mores and norms and mores by which society operated in. Forget about this egalitarian nonsense. Y'all already know what I'm saying.
Straining those muscles. Look at Styles, he's trying to hold on.
Animate as well as inanimate. For instance, a ship's captain uses a lifeless rudder but the watch, or a servant is from the point of view of his craft, categorized as one of its keys. So any piece of property can be regarded as its eliminating a man's life, and its property is assembled as such a slave is
Rock is made a believer out of Corey Graves. Anything is possible. AJ Styles is going to have to work a little bit harder to become a true contender in the WWE. I have no doubt he will.
Eras were modern history's first real swag surfers. They took a look at Greek philosophy and then took a look at their slave population, saw that like 9 and 10 of them were black, and because 2 and 2 equals fish, obviously, surmised that, aha, the blacks must be inferior to us. But not those half-baked whites, obviously, because we still think less of them than Ben Simmons does effort. I swear these Ben Simmons jokes are just way too easy. Almost as easy as gameplay.
The Negroes of the first... The Negroes of the first... Wait. The Negroes of the first zone dwell in caves and thickets, eat herbs, live in savage isolation, and do not congregate and eat each other. The same applies to the Slavs, and they become correspondingly remote from humanity.
This nigga. Case closed, she's a witch. We've got our culprit, right? Well, not quite, because remember that other fact that I mentioned earlier? The one that Ibn Khaldun made a point to refute? You know what that factor was, buckos? It was the Bible. Well, it kind of was the Bible. Let me explain. So, if you spent anything more than 10 minutes in a Sunday school class, or a Liberty University anthropology course for that matter, then you were probably taught that God told Noah that it was going to rain cats, dogs, and cartoonishly attractive men for 40 days and nights. And so Noah gathered up his entire family as well as 2 of every living creature on the planet, and they got on the boat. And everyone on Earth, aside from Noah and his family, died one of the most horrific deaths imaginable. You really don't think about how messed up this story is when you're like 6 years old. But I mean, then again, they did make up the whole nursery rhyme about the Black Plague and London Bridge. Wonder if they'll do that for COVID one day. Well, if you're a dirty heathen and stopped going to church when you were 12 years old upon discovering boys and or girls, the second half of that story goes like this. Upon leaving the ark, Noah celebrated the way that you would imagine someone who has spent a year in a floating zoo would. He got hammered. Like, literally fall down drunk, knuck if you buck, white girl wasted. And again, who wouldn't after having to smell the back end of a giraffe for 365 days? Anyway, Noah, not unlike a lot of y'all watching during the fall semester of your freshman year, somehow wound up newborn naked.